Hey guys, just a reminder, this is not official medical advice or such. Please seek an appointment with a licensed medical provider.
All right. We are in Johnson City. I'm remotely in Performance Medicine Johnson City, and you're actually in Johnson City.
I'm coming to you from a broom closet, and I'm just joking. I'm kidding. No, we just got some supplies in the office in the back today. So
I'm with Lucas Schmidt, our nutrition coach over in Performance Medicine Johnson City. Lucas, how's it going, man?
going well. How about yourself?
I am wonderful. It's funny. We're both kind of right in the middle of our days, and I just appreciate you taking the time to do this Dive Into Diet episode with me. Why don't you kind of clue me in, clue us in? What are we going to go over today? What's on tap?
Well, it'll be a two-parter today. So I wanted to talk. This is more in the exercise event. I don't know why I made a sad face about that. It's diet, though, But if you exercise well, you can eat more. So, or they are so interlinked. If you want them to be optimal, that's why I like to talk about exercise sometimes. So I was going to talk about range of motion, also known as ROM. Training.
I love this topic because you hear really good things about range of motion, and also you can overextend. You can have too much range of motion. So where do you want to start? I like it.
We'll start with what it means for those that don't know what ROM training is, or full ROM. You'll see ROM on like workout sheets sometimes. They use a lot of acronyms on. If you've ever downloaded online like a free workout planner, or gone to some YouTube channel where they talk about training protocols, things like that, you'll see ROM a lot written. Usually they say, if it's a person speaking, they'll say range of motion. But what that means is what's in the words. Range of motion. Typically, it's an unspoken full range of motion. But ROM in itself is just implying the maneuver I'm doing. But I prefer generally full range of motion training, meaning I take my joint to its maximal extension point and contraction point. So you take it through its full movement pattern as far as the joint will allow without injury. So what you mentioned earlier would be too much range of motion. An example would be if you hyperextend your knee.
Right. Right.
Hyperextension is when you go past the joint's designed range of motion, but usually that involves, something's torn, something's broken, a ligament has torn, and you can generally feel if you're about to do that. So the body has a lot of safeguards to prevent that from happening. But I mainly wanted to talk about, it's going to take two parts just because I think, I don't want the videos to be super, super long. But just this first episode in this two-parter will be mostly just about the terminology, kind of what does it mean? Why might you be interested in this type of training, or why would anyone care about full range of motion? And then I think the next one will be more like, well, how do I apply it to my training? So
yeah, that's what I was going to ask is like, I'm sure there is, because everyone has different capabilities.
Yeah.
And just if it says full range of motion doesn't mean I can actually execute on that.
Right. So it'll be easy. I'm going to scoot back just a little bit. Sorry, I don't want to move too much. But just to give you a visual example, what would full versus partial range of motion be? Full range, so if I'm doing a bicep curl, you can kind of see me. So a bicep curl is typically, I'm holding a weight and I curl it up with my arm. Partial range of motion, which you see a lot in the gym, is when you'll see usually a big, strong person with 60-pound dumbbell, which is insane to be curling, but not a criticism. Like if you can curl 60 pounds strict, you're very strong. But I'll see sometimes people holding a weight here and they're sort of doing this, right? They're curling. That is half range of motion because my elbow joint actually allows my biceps to extend all the way to this point, right?
Mm.
So my elbow is now locked out. That is full range. Full range would be I take the weight, I go all the way down here, and I curl it all the way up, and then I go all the way back down. And to some people that may seem obvious, but believe it or not, a lot of people train in their strongest point, which is sort of half range and up. Most of the time, the muscle is weaker in its full range extension. Okay, so that may sound like a bad thing. I mean, like, well, why would I want to train in that area? The reason is you want your weakest point to be stronger. So when you do lose your strength, you don't hyperextend accidentally or something like that. But also, a lot of the research indicates that the majority, you get more muscle growth when you train from a stretched position through the full range than versus half. That isn't to say you can't grow muscle training in half range of motion or quarter or 3/4, whatever, but you get a little bit more hypertrophy and muscle breakdown from that stretch position. So that would be the advantage.
The stretch position is just fully locked out.
Yeah. Yeah. So another example would be in a bench press,
Yeah.
the hand is almost in line, just a little bit higher than the pec. Like you can feel it when the pec can't go any further generally, unless you have a terrible shoulder injury or something like that. So I also consider full range of motion training actually protection from injury, because like I mentioned earlier, you're training that muscle even at its weakest to sort of brace against weight and force, and you're improving, because sometimes you're improving the muscle's strength through all positions. Okay, so cases like an example would be somebody almost slips and then they pull a muscle. Usually we pull muscles when we're sort of doing everyday activities, or we bend over to pick something up and we're kind of in a stretched, certain muscles are stretched and we go to lift and tweak the back, things like that. That kind of stuff, not saying it's 100% prevention, but it can be improved, your protection against those kind of injuries, if you would train in full range of motion. Carefully, of course. We'll talk about how to carefully train in it in the next episode. But
I would also imagine that, if you're going to go full range of motion, you're going to have to maybe lower your weight a little bit, which also could protect you from injury.
Yes, so that's a great point. They call that the limiting factor. Sometimes, like if you're really into training, someone will say, well, what are the limiting factors of this training? Full range of motion, the limiting factor is the fact that your muscle is weakest at its full stretch position. So another big example would be like a barbell squat. When you load up your shoulders with a barbell and you squat down. Full range of motion would be, well, I can't say it on here because it requires a bad word, but I think you know what I'm thinking. Your bottom near the ground.
Yeah.
That's full range of motion because the quadricep is fully extended when the knee is bent all the way. Okay. So I can't really, it's hard to demonstrate that on this camera, but this is my leg. This is my finger. When my knee is all the way bent, the quad is actually at full stretch. So squatting very deep is training in high range of motion. But like you said, the deeper you go, the harder it is to get back up. So you do have to lower your weight initially to train in proper range of motion.
And, with the squat in particular, there is a lot of, I think it's not controversy. It's just different philosophies around what's safe and what's not for your knees.
Right.
And is there any sort of safeguard that you use when you're training in full range of motion for your legs? Because I hadn't thought about the quad being at full extension there when your bottom's about to hit the ground.
Yeah. Well, I think most people think with the quads, especially, they think, oh, no, if my leg's fully bent, it's flexed, right? Because when you the leg looks short. And when we do contract, we shorten, but you're actually contracting the hamstring and the glutes because you're pulling the leg back, right? The knee, the shin and down back, which the quadriceps job is to reverse that motion and straighten the leg. So, and to push us away with our legs. So, yeah, so if you want to protect your knee, there are things you would want to do leading up to that. I can detail that more in the next episode if you'd like. I'm happy to discuss specific move patterns I take myself through before every leg workout to prepare the muscles, or also things I did early on before I started doing deeper range of motion with my legs. Because you do want to, that's the thing about range of motion training. You can't just dive in with if you've never done it, if you've never taken all your muscles to their full extension, you're going to have to drop your weight substantially to get through that safely, right? You could keep doing your half rep stuff at heavy weight if you're worried you're going to lose that weight that you've been moving. But if you add in full range of motion sets, you're going to have to lower the weight, particularly when the knees are involved. You just, a knee injury is nasty.
Right. That's the one that, when I think full range of motion, I know there's lots of different schools of thought around that. But full range of motion, I'm with you on this. Like, I think it's a good. Is it a goal, or is it just a way of training? Is this like we're working towards full range of motion?
So, subject to change, of course, if new research comes. I think it's a good goal. A micro goal and a macro goal. So I think it's good to have that be your goal for most of your strength movements. Maybe there's some power moves that you may not want that in. There could be some debate there. But macro, I think both actually. Overarching, I would train for full range of motion, and each individual exercise I would as well.
All right. Well, we're going to call that an episode, and stay tuned, guys, for next week. We're going to get into how to do some of this full range of motion training. Lucas, man, I appreciate the time today. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you for having me.
Don't go away.